Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll be looking at some of the major changes that have been announced in the Q&A like a day ago or so. So people who played the beta when Mythic Plus was released, some people realized, hey, I'm doing this Mythic Plus dungeon and every time I try to swap some piece of gear, I get a message saying you cannot do that right now. What's going on? This must be a bug. There's no way Blizzard is going to implement this kind of system that's going to dumb down the game because I love swapping gear. No, this is fully intended. In the last Q&A, they said that basically this is a fully intended change. They want you to be more precise or more considerate about what gear choice you're gonna go with when entering a Mythic Plus dungeon. And Blizzard's thought process for this is that a Mythic Plus dungeon, the whole Mythic Plus dungeon, like 15, 20, 25-minute dungeon, is equivalent to a raid boss. Is that people, when doing a raid boss, a multi-phase raid boss, a lot of the times they'll be like, oh, I wish in phase 1 I could swap to a single target set. Phase 2, if I could have more burst AoE. So you can't do that in raids. So what they did is that basically Mythic Plus is the same as a raid encounter, and therefore you can't do that anymore. So a lot of people are not affected by this, and it's fully understandable. A lot of people don't swap gear. A lot of people don't do, like, it's not an exaggeration for me to say that if you're not doing really high Mythic Plus, you probably never really have to swap gear, or at least you have not looked into the aspect of needing to swap gear. But if you do really high Mythic Plus, you will notice that, like in MDI, you'll notice that tanks will be swapping, DPS will be swapping to tank trinkets to cheese certain boss mechanics. You'll see healer swapping to DPS trinkets to provide more DPS when there's not that much healing required. You will see basically gear swap on every single trash pack. It was insane. It was insane how people can really optimize their characters and find creative ways to defeat trash packs, to mitigate trash pack damage, to avoid damage, to provide more DPS as a healer. It's insane how when people given the option, they will find the most different ways of optimizing every single aspect of a Mythic Plus dungeon, which actually was extremely fun to watch and extremely fun to actually do yourself. So right now, this is going to be removed. You no longer will be able to swap gear in Mythic Plus dungeons. The fact is that people already said Warlock cheese is available because you can just create a summoning portal, go outside a dungeon, swap out gear, and get summoned back. I'm 99% sure Warlock portals are going to be in some way disabled. There's no way Blizzard is going to allow this. This means that Warlocks will be the #1 DPS class in a Mythic Plus dungeon. So that's only a cheese that's available only right now in beta. I am very confident that's not going to happen. So let's look a bit more about this whole change. So you might be saying like, hey, MadSkillz, there is no legendaries, there is no tier sets in BFA. It doesn't even matter that much when you swap gear because it's only trinkets that you really care about. It's kinda to some extent true. Trinkets are the big, or at least trinkets is one of those items that get swapped out the most. A DPS might want to have a single target trinket. A DPS might want to swap to an AoE trinket for trash pack and vice versa. This happens all of the time. Same with a healer. Healer might have some really heavy, like, you know, healing trinket that's going to help them heal for a specific pad, but then after that you'll notice that a boss 2 does no damage at all, so I'm going to swap to DPS trinkets. That happens all the time. At the same time, you have to look at Azeroth gear. Azeroth gear is kinda your legendaries or your talents to some extent, because some of the Azeroth gear traits are really powerful. And the fact is that you have 3 Azeroth pieces. You have helm, shoulders, and chest. Those 3 pieces, of course, you can have multiple of those pieces. The only thing that affects which traits you unlock is your Heart of Azeroth neck, which depending on the level, you'll start unlocking traits. So let's say this was like what was my intention when I was considering Azeroth pieces. I'm gonna have 3 Azeroth pieces that are going to have spec-specific healing increases for my rest of Jewel. It's going to have specific traits that are going to increase my healing on whatever rejuvenation. It's going to be my healing set. Then I'm gonna pick up another Azeroth pieces or another gear set of Azeroth pieces that's going to be purely using traits that are DPS. So example, for the people who are not familiar with Azeroth gear, you have to notice that there are traits that are spec specific. So traits are going to increase my rejuvenation healing. Then there is general traits. There's a trait that can be used by any spec, things like Sandstorm, things like Azeroth Globules, which basically allow you to deal damage or use spells and through that get some additional AoE damage, which can be used by a tank who wants to do more damage, which can be used by a DPS who wants to do more AoE damage, or used by a healer who all of a sudden doesn't want, or at least feels that there's not that much healing to be needed, so they're going to swap to DPS. So I was gonna keep like a set of those, a set of healing gear, and I'm gonna swap around every time. I'm gonna have multiple, of course, backspace. Backspace is a real issue when you're doing gear swapping. But that was my full intention of what I'm going to do. Of course, you can change Azeroth pieces. You can change the traits in Azeroth pieces. You can go to the Azeroth Reforger and pay a certain amount of gold to change the trait. You have to pay more gold the more changes you do. So over time, it's going to accumulate to a big part, but then it's going to decay over time. So it is possible, but the fact is you will most likely want to have multiple pieces. So I was going to do that. I was going to swap. But now, I can't really do that. Now, what you have to do is that you have to consider, you have to really think about what kind of gear I'm going to be using at the very start of the dungeon. And this is where, let's say some punishing mechanics come into play. Let's say boss 2 is intensely crazy. Like, the amount of healing that I need to do on boss 2 is just insane. I need to get some mastery heavy gear, I need to get some defensive trinkets, I need to get all of my healing traits in this. And then you think about boss 1. Boss 1 and boss like 3 or 4 or whatever. There's no damage at all. There's no damage to the party coming out at all. Like, I could go full on DPS gear, there would be nothing to heal at all. And all of a sudden you'll be thinking, do I want to go full healing gear just for that one boss? And you probably will. You probably want to go play safe, and all of a sudden you'll be doing boss 1 and boss 2, and you like your DPS will be really, or at least if you're going to try to DPS, it's going to feel a little bit lackluster. So to some extent you can say that this change for healers is kind of creating a bigger gap between DPS and healing. Unless you're going to try and go this hybrid build where you're going to have some certain pieces of healing set and some certain pieces of DPS set. You also have to consider that for healers, for every single healer out there, mastery is a big stat for healing. But mastery is zero worth to DPS. So all of a sudden healers will have to balance out their mastery stat in order to, you know, get enough healing gains, but also have enough DPS. There's a lot of this, to some extent. The quick decision making that you do right before the boss, right before trash pull is gone. You no longer have to worry about that. Say, this is simplifying the game straight away. You don't have to think about the different gear sets you're going to use on different bosses, different gear sets you're going to use on trash pack. But it does give you some kind of a, you know, you really have to think about exactly what traits, exactly what Azeroth pieces, what trinkets you're going to use on at the start of a dungeon, which means you kind of have to know what the dungeon is going to be about. You're going to know what abilities bosses are going to do, and that's going to be like, you know, you're going to do that anyways if you're doing high Mythic Plus. So my overall experiences or my overall thought process about this is that it's definitely a simplification. It's definitely a simplification. People who never swap gear won't care about this at all. It's not going to affect them at all, which is perfectly fine. People who do high Mythic Plus and used to swap gear on every single trash pack, this is a huge change for them. It's not going to be fun for a DPS to be using a tank trinket or a like damage mitigation trinket the whole run because boss 3 is going to one-shot them. But everything else is fine. But maybe it's the risks that you're willing to take. And it's also highly dependent on how Blizzard is going to balance high Mythic Plus. Are they going to be a ton of one-shot mechanics in certain classes who don't have enough personal cooldowns are going to suffer the most from this. So all of a sudden those classes will have to pick up tank trinkets in order to survive. We have to see what it's like. Overall, I'm not a huge fan of this change. I can see both perspectives here, but I'm not a huge fan of this change. I like swapping gear, but at the same time, I don't always like to have 10 different sets for every single situation. But at the same time, you also have these add-ons who help you with this. And the people who, like, no one is forced into doing gear swaps. No one was ever forced into doing gear swaps. If you're a casual player, if you're doing 15s or whatever, if you're not looking to push 25s, you didn't have to swap gear. You could just play the way you want to do and everything would have been fine. But now all of a sudden with this change, Blizzard is directly punishing the high Mythic Plus players by removing this kind of, like, I mean, it's creative way of avoiding damage, creative way of dealing more damage and things like that. It's simplifying it. I try to see both sides of this argument. I can see why Blizzard did this. I can see this might work in the end. Maybe people will adapt to this. Maybe people won't care about this at the end. Like, only time will tell. Overall, I feel this wasn't really necessary. But I can see why Blizzard did this. I would love to hear your opinion on this. I really would love to hear your opinion on this. I really want to know if you liked gear swapping. If you want it to come back. If you enjoy the change that Blizzard made right now. Do you think it's going to work? I really want to know your opinions about this. Thank you for watching this guide, and I'll see you in my next video.